So, do you know the what is the current requirement for school day length in this district?
It is if I'm not mistaken, a 6.5 hour day.
Okay.
I think students are here for 6 hours of educational time, but staff work that extra half an hour.
Does it matter when it starts or when it ends?
There's no defined state or national expectation for when school times start. In most districts, not all, but most, high school starts the earliest, elementary gets out the latest. Sometimes you see a flip. There are cases where some middle schools are the latest time for dismissal. And I'm not sure if there's a busing issue in some of those districts, but in most cases, high schools start first.
All right. Could you see this changing? Why or why not?
Which part changing?
The amount of time that's required for the school day.
Or when school starts, like the start time for school?
There is a push nationally, in some states especially, to increase the amount of time students are in school.
Oh,
Like go later in the day.
Mhm.
Not later, but more hours every day.
Yeah.
A lot of places, there's always talk about extending into the summer, because you'll hear a common term called summer loss, where especially like if your weakness in school's math, those 2 months of no math at all, when you come back in September, sometimes it's hard to know the math, so you'll hear a lot of talk. Some of the charter schools that you hear about, they're called 6 to 6 programs, 6 in the morning till 6 at night. Very different. I'm not sure there's going to be a big blanket that everyone needs to add more time, because I'm not sure it's necessary. Start and end times are a very hot topic recently. Just Polson recently started a little bit later, just purely for the benefit of young adolescents to sleep a little more. I think it's been pretty positive. I do think there'll be a push at this level at some point. I'm curious what that push will look like though, because I do, from the conversations I've had with people about this, they've always looked at the front end of school, like the impact in the morning. They haven't considered what could happen later in the day and how things change pretty significantly. Not bad or good, but more people are talking about just the morning and then not focusing on what impact will that have in the afternoon. So the discussion has come up a few times. I think it will continue to come up because you will see all the studies on what sleep deprivation does to especially the adolescent brain. When you guys, sleep's really important for people your age.
My thought was that if elementary students go later than high school students, but high school students can get rides to school and stuff like that, so they don't need to worry about like parents. So why shouldn't elementary kids go when parents go to work in the morning, which is earlier usually? That's what I was thinking. Like maybe they should switch that up.
That would be really interesting. One of the arguments you would hear is in a lot of cases, people who have elementary kids and high school kids, but both work, or if it's a single parent family, the benefit of having you home when their son or daughter who's much younger gets off the bus is very helpful. And that's, to have an elementary student get off the bus in 2nd grade and no one home, I think some parents would say that's not good. Timing wise for high school kids, that would be great. Because the challenge though is, if I'm not mistaken, the elementary schools get out close to 4 o'clock. So if you're a baseball player, and you have an away game, if you get out that late, unless the field has lights, you probably don't finish your game.
Yeah, sports was big with that.
Right, sports is a big one. So is that a reason not to look at it? Absolutely not. But a lot of people forget that side. But that is an interesting point. I think a lot of parents also might worry if their elementary kids route the bus stop in the dark.
Yeah.
In your case, you're pretty safe at the bus stop. You put a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader, that's a little more dangerous just for the decision making to not only be safe, but also there's bad people out there who target little kids.
So our last question is, what's the biggest complaint you get from students around the school?
Probably dress code is the biggest complaint.
Oh, really?
Which is funny because no one gets in trouble ever. But we're doing a little mini fundraiser type, collect clothes for kids who get dress coded so they could go to class. We never have banned a kid from class or given a consequence. But I do have a lot of students pushing for us to look at start time, and that's a bigger discussion than me.
Mhm.
You have to look at buses, do we have enough available if we did that? You have to look at, obviously, parent input, I think most importantly, student input. If I had my perfect world, which I like to live in once in a while, it doesn't happen often, perfect world would be for us to have enough buses to give every student the choice, do you want period 1 or 6 off?
Mhm.
And for the, some of you like to get up early and get your day done and be done at 1 o'clock. You guys would have your classes 1 through 5, obviously lunch would be in there, but for the student who loves to sleep, that extra hour, that's a big hour. You know, they come in 2 through 6. If we ever could figure out busing like that, I think we kind of solve the best of both worlds piece. And I think we have to get a little more creative if we're going to look at this, because I'm not sure there's a blanket that fits everyone. I think some of you might like getting up early and being done with your day, as opposed to others who really enjoy that sleep piece. That would be my perfect world, where we give, you know, you guys, when you do your schedule, you mark a box. I want period 1 free. The problem with that is public schools are required to have busing available. Even though, as you know, not many students take our buses,
Mhm.
we have to have buses available for everyone to have a seat if everyone decided to take it. Even if the parent said, you don't have to, we have to. So I'd like a more creative avenue so kids had that choice, and I think teachers will like it too. I think some teachers would not be happy if the day went later. And if we said, okay, you can work with the students who come in later in the day, and we'd have some who work with earlier, that'd be a pretty neat mix.
Yeah.
But we don't get too many complaints. You know, the student body here has listened to the message we've been sending. Come and talk to us, and we'll make changes if they're worth making changes, and we've made a lot. This is one that I think is worth a good discussion, but to keep in mind, you know, like if you're an athlete, because we get out at 2 o'clock, you can participate in jazz band and then go to baseball, for example.
Mhm.
If we went later, a student would then have to choose because it'd be too late in the day. I don't think that's a deal breaker, but right now, a lot of our students don't have to decide what they partake in after school. They can participate in whatever they want, which is actually really cool. If we made a change to a later time, I'd love to figure out how we can still keep that flexibility, because we don't want you to make choices. You know, if you love performing as well as playing a sport, here you can do both at this point. And, you know, I'm not sure you'd be able to if we started, like, if we went to school at 9 o'clock, for an example, you know, you'd get out of school at 3:30. Totally different world, especially this time of the year or early in the spring when the light is not really with sunset. It's not that extended after the daytime, you know. So I think it's a great one to study. I think students and parents and staff need to look at the back end and say, what are we willing to sacrifice? And we also have to have a discussion saying, if we started an hour and a half later, would all of you go to bed at the same time and get an hour and a half more sleep, or would all of your after-school commitments make you get home an hour and a half later and you're still getting the same amount of sleep? Like, if we can do something where our student body gets more sleep, no matter what it was, how we got there, it's great. I just hope we don't do something that changes a lot of things, but you're still getting the same amount of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bigger discussion. So the mistake a lot of school districts make, this one doesn't seem to, which is great, is they don't include you in the conversation. You know, students should be a main part of that conversation.
Yeah.
What I was also thinking is that in the real world, you're gonna wake up at 6 o'clock and you're gonna go to your job at 6 o'clock.
Mhm.
So I mean, that's probably when school should start too, because it gets you ready. So
Right.
like on the other side of that, that's
Yeah, you know, you know, I'm here by 6:30 every day, and I like minimal sleep, and I'm a morning person. You know, there's some people who probably didn't choose high school as their profession. They probably went elementary, not only because of the students and the level and the content, but, you know, this is early for a lot of people. You know, and, you know, for the professional who has the 9 to 5 job, I mean, we're 2.5 hours into our day before they're at their position. So it's a really, you know, we start early, but the benefits after school, you have a lot of options. But I do think because Paulson started later this year, we'll start to look at it. And I would say that's a whole school community discussion. You know, even students who have jobs, I mean, you might lose a couple hours in the afternoon if you get out later. Is that worth it? And if everyone thinks yes, I do think it's something to consider. Big discussion now.
What's your thoughts on the brain not starting until 10 o'clock? Like it doesn't start officially working until 10.
Yeah, I think there's some legitimacy behind that, you know, and that's where the model of schools, especially high schools years ago, is still what we somewhat follow today, where it's like the factory model, where we're gonna get everyone ready to go to work in a factory when they're done with the high school. You know, it's very different now. You know, the number of students who go to college, you know, we're 97, 98, 99% of our graduates go to college. So that type of model is not really ideal. In a lot of cases, public schools haven't changed at the same pace as society has changed. That's why I think that some of those flexible options where you can pick, you know, if you can come in, you know, in a really cool world, if we had unlimited staffing and unlimited money, we would run a morning school day for kids who are interested and an afternoon for kids who are interested. Then you could pick whatever you wanted. That would be awesome. Again, funds are always unlimited, actually never unlimited, and staffing, you know, and even building space, but that would be the perfect world. So that 10 o'clock piece, that's why we hope teachers are really engaging and are encouraging a lot of students to be active in class as opposed to just lecturing. Because those first few periods of the day, if you have a teacher who's just lecturing, I'm sure it's really tough to pay attention to what's going on in the class and being engaged. I've seen a lot of teachers getting kids really involved in discussions and groups and doing real world type projects that hopefully get that mind, you know, ready to work before that 10 o'clock mark. But it's tough. I mean, I see a lot of kids in the morning, I say good morning, and you know, their response is sluggish compared to when I talk to them in the afternoon. And they're just tired, and that's normal. You know, like my son's 15, he'll like, I'm tired. I'm like, well, you're normal. You're supposed to be. You know, that's how it goes. And it's tough, I get it. I mean, high school times are not designed for how your bodies work. I mean, you are programmed in your brains to stay up really late and sleep in. And high school doesn't encourage that at all, especially when you have a big workload here.
Is that it for questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Let me know.